Welcome back to the solutions to the logical reasoning section of the free LawPrep. We've seen that the logical reasoning section of the LSAT India primarily tests you on your ability to understand an argument and its structure. Now, the argument that is contained in the problem could either be strengthened or weakened by a couple of additional facts or premises. In this video, we will deal with some problems that illustrate as to how an argument could be either strengthened or weakened. Let us have a look at the problems.
Now, how do you begin solving a question on logical reasoning? In this video lesson series, of course, I have clubbed the logical reasoning questions into various categories for your comfort, but that's not something that's going to happen in the exam, right? So you need to be able to focus your attention and know what the requirement of the question is immediately, and you need to switch from question to question. So a good idea is to start by looking at the question statement. When you read this, it says, which one of the following, if true, lends most support to the claim above? So now you know what you're going to do here. You know for a fact that here there's a claim, and the claim in most cases will be in the form of an argument, okay? And then you have some options here, and one of them is going to support this one the most. So it's going to lend the most support, and you are looking for that option. Remember, when you have this kind of a direction as you venture out to solve the question, you are unlikely to meander. You're unlikely to wander, right? It's very important while solving these questions to stay focused on the task at hand, okay? Pause the video. Now try to solve this question by yourself, and then we'll go for it together. Okay, so the question here says, which one of the following lends the most support? Okay, now let me tell you what any statement could do to a claim. It can be one of three possibilities only. It could either weaken the claim that is made here, okay, or it may be indifferent, it may be irrelevant, so it will neither weaken nor support, it just is something else. The third thing is that it could support. Now, another parameter here is how much is it supporting? So you're looking for the option that supports it the most. So the first kind of options that you can eliminate are, of course, those that weaken. You definitely don't want them. If it is irrelevant, again, you don't want them. And then you can choose the best out of those that actually support. Let us go ahead and see it in some detail. Right, let's read the claim together. It says, the function of rapid eye movement sleep stages, during which most dreaming occurs, is to help one assimilate the preceding day's learning. Now, when you see this sentence, this is just one sentence, right? When you see this sentence, you can see one part that is between the commas, okay? And this is like a qualifier. It tells you some additional information about what has been spoken of previously. Let me give you an example. Let's say I tell you that the function of teeth is to chew food. The function of the teeth is to chew food. And then I say the function of the teeth, which are of four types, is to chew food. Now, I would have put which are of four types within a comma, right? Within commas, that is a qualifier. You can understand the essence of the sentence by first omitting these qualifiers, so it's telling you that, hey, during rapid eye movement, you have most of the dreaming, okay? But you can just see that the sentence that you have here is that it tells you that REM sleep, okay, is to help one assimilate the preceding day's learning. Assimilate is a word that is kind of synonymous with absorb, okay? So you can say that the function of REM sleep is to help absorb what was learned on the day before. That's what preceding day means, okay? So now we've understood as to what this is. What this means is that you first learn something, and then you have sleep, okay? And within that sleep, you have the REM stage of sleep, okay? And then it leads to assimilation. Therefore, what you can see here is that there is a chronology, right? You can see that first there is learning, then when there is sleep, there is assimilation, okay? This is an important point. Let us go ahead and look at the options and see as to which one works. Right, let's start with option C. It reads, The more REM sleep people have, the more easily they learn things the next day. Looks like an appealing answer, but I want you to pay attention to the chronology that we saw a moment ago. We saw that first there is learning, and then there is the sleep, okay? And then there is the assimilation. This was the chronology. But when you see option C, you can see that the chronology has been flipped. It talks of sleep, okay, and then it talks of learning thereafter the next day. And therefore you can say that C is not the answer, right? Keep the structure of the sentence in mind, okay? If you get lost in the words, you're not going to get the answer right so easily. Moving ahead, you will find an option or two here that are kind of unrelated to the claim that is made here. They're kind of irrelevant, so you will not find them really supporting. Have a look at B, okay? It says people who spend their waking hours learning new tasks remember their dreams more frequently than those who do not learn new tasks. Now, when you see this thing talking about remembering dreams and new tasks, it's bringing something that's kind of unrelated and irrelevant. Likewise, when you look at the option D, it says people who do not have many dreams take as long to learn new tasks as those who dream frequently. Now, to some extent, this is irrelevant, okay, because it's talking about few dreams as not being very different from those who have more dreams. In fact, you can also to some extent say that it even weakens, right? Because if most of the dreaming occurs during REM and few dreams and more dreams you see no difference, it definitely is not supporting this claim, okay? So you can even get rid of option D. Let's move ahead. Okay, there are some options in here that definitely weaken. If you look at option E, it says people with poor memories tend to remember more when they have extra non-REM sleep. So it kind of here says that you remember more with non-REM sleep. So this is completely discrediting what is given in here. This leaves us with only one option that automatically becomes our answer. And you can see that when you look at option A, it says the more people learn during waking hours, the more REM sleep they tend to have, right? Because you've learnt more, so you need more REM so that you can assimilate more. So A is the answer, okay? Because you have more data to assimilate, you need to sleep more, and then you have more of the REM sleep because you've learnt a lot. You can see here that the chronology has been followed. You first learn, then you go for sleep, and during the sleep you assimilate. So if the REM is what is assimilating this, the more you've learnt, the more the sleep you need. Let us say you got this question wrong, and it's fine. It's not a big deal if you get the question wrong in the first attempt. In fact, when you get a question wrong, it gives you an opportunity to identify as to why you were getting it wrong, and you will find that the skill of being able to solve even a couple of LSAT India logical reasoning questions correctly will really help you when you go on to the other questions. So don't be disheartened if you get the question wrong. Instead, look at the right answer and try to refine your own process, your own method, so that you can start doing better. Let us go ahead. Right then, in this question, we are looking at which option most strengthens the argument given here. So what that means is you have an argument given here, and again you have options here that may either be strengthening, weakening, or maybe not affecting, and you have to pick the option that strengthens it the most. Pause the video and try solving it yourself, and then we'll go for it together. Let's first read the argument and understand that in terms of its structure. Remember that the logical reasoning section does not test you so much on fact. It does not test you on content. It tests you on your ability to understand and comprehend structure. Okay, let's go for this together now in some detail. I've marked these as 4 sentences for the sake of clarity and comfort. The first sentence reads, in an experiment, 4 wild pigeons were trained to open boxes of seeds by piercing the boxes with their beaks. So it says that 4 pigeons were trained to do something, right? They were trained to do A. Okay, and this is what I'm trying to tell you. When you're looking at structure, it doesn't so much matter as to what they were trained to do. So let's say they were trained to do A. Then the second sentence, following this training, the 4 birds were returned back to their wild flock. Okay. Third sentence, the boxes of seeds were then left out in the birds' habitat, and within a month it was found that at least 24 wild pigeons had acquired the ability to pierce open the box of seeds. So these 4 trained birds were sent back to the other birds, and in a month 24 of these had acquired this ability, this skill, A. And then it says, fourth sentence, thus other wild pigeons must have learnt this box piercing skills from the 4 pigeons that had been trained in the experiment. Okay, so since the 24 1 month later knew this, they must have learnt it from these 4. This is the argument. Okay, let's go ahead. So if you look at the argument here, it says that 4 were taught something and then sent back. Okay, then you saw that a month later 24 of the birds knew it, and then the conclusion of this experiment, as you can see from the word thus, it indicates that it's a conclusion. The conclusion is that those 4 must have taught the others. If you've been solving questions on assumptions all this while, you'd see that there's an assumption in here. If you want, I'd like you to pause the video and think about what the assumption here is. Right? Pause the video. Okay. The assumption here is that these birds, these 24 birds, could not have learnt it by themselves from elsewhere. You see, maybe, let's say there were 4 birds that were there in this experiment, experiment number 1. Maybe let's say there was an experiment number 1 here. Maybe this was being done at a certain location. Let's say this location was maybe in the place A. Maybe there was another experiment being carried out somewhere else, okay, and you had these birds in the place B, okay, and let's say the bird's habitat was H, okay, and you had these birds here, okay. Now maybe these were sent back to go here, so you have these birds in here, okay, and then these birds were also taught something like this in this experiment and they were also sent back, okay, so you had these birds here as well. Now it's possible that maybe these birds taught these guys the skill and maybe these birds did not teach them. It's possible, you know, or maybe these birds already knew it, they were born with that skill. So the assumption here is that these birds could not have learnt it from elsewhere. Now that we've given enough thought to this argument, let us go ahead and see as to which one of the options strengthens it. Now, when you look at an argument and you find that there's an assumption, it kind of tells me that, you know, this is the missing link. You know, you need this assumption for the argument to be strengthened. So this is in many ways like an assumption based question. So what I want to look for is there an option that kind of gives me this, that these birds can only learn if they are taught by these 4 birds. An option that gives me this is the right answer. You may want to pause the video and see if you find that answer. Right, you don't find them in the exact same words, but have a look at option C. It says that a control group of pigeons provided with boxes of seeds, right, but no training, did not acquire the ability to open the boxes. So what this option tells you, which is the right answer, is that if they do not have training, they can't do it, which means training is needed, right? So it means they learn only if trained. This is what strengthens the argument. If you look at the other options, let's say we look at the other options together now. Let's say you look at option E. It says attempting to pierce objects is instinctive, which means that no training is required. So it weakens. Let's look at option D. It says other experimenters were also known to have been training and releasing pigeons. So it was like the case that I spoke of. Again, it weakens. Let's look at option A. The pigeons from this flock were accustomed to eating food left out for them by human beings. Irrelevant, that neither strengthens nor weakens. Look at option B. Pigeons are known to employ many inventive strategies in order to find new sources of food. This is kind of irrelevant as well as weakening because it says that they can do this themselves without training. So the only option that kind of points towards the importance of training is C, right? Let us go ahead and solve the next question. Right. So with the logical reasoning questions, as I always say, it helps to start off by reading the question statement. It gives you some direction on how you should proceed. Okay, so pause the video, try solving the question by yourself, and then we'll go for it together. Let us begin by trying to understand the question statement a little clearly. Okay, it says each of the following, if true, helps to strengthen the argument except, which means that out of these 5 options, right, the 5 options that we have here, 4 of them are going to help strengthen the argument. 4 of them will strengthen the argument, and then there's one that does not strengthen. Now, not strengthening does not mean weakening alone. It means that either it weakens or maybe it does not affect the argument. So we are looking for the option in here that either weakens or that does not affect the argument, because 4 out of these 5 are going to strengthen and they are not our answers. Let us go ahead and first understand the argument and then proceed to looking at the options. Let us read the argument together. It reads, after country Z dramatically increased its per litre gasoline tax, it was determined that the financial impact of the increase, measured in terms of the percentage of the residents' average income, was substantially less for the residents of the northeastern province than for the residents of other provinces. Long sentence. Now, how do you learn a long sentence? How do you comprehend a long sentence? You do that by breaking it down into smaller parts, understanding those parts, and then integrating the meaning back. Now, when you see a sentence like this, there are some words that you can kind of black out initially, some phrases that you can kind of hide for a while and then get back to them. Let me show you. Now, when you look at this, it says dramatically increased. How about I just make this increased by removing this adverb? Likewise, you can see that it says substantially less. Let's just call it less. Let me just say it's less, so I remove substantially. Okay, and let's say here you can see that after this happened, it was determined that so and so happened, or it's like saying someone said that something happened. Let's just remove even this part of it. That let's just stick to the fact without saying that it was determined that. Okay, then if you look at what is there between the commas here, between these commas, between this and this, it is telling you how this financial impact was measured. You can either black this out first and look at the meaning thereafter, or we can look at the meaning first and then black it out. I think in this case, let's look at the meaning of it first together, and then I'll strike that out as well. It says measured in terms of the percentage of the resident's average income, which means that let's say the increase of the financial impact. You're looking at the financial impact. Let's say there was a 10 rupee per litre increase. Okay, you're not looking at it in terms only of this. You're looking at it in terms of the salary. So let's say you're looking at it in terms of, let's say someone buys 5 liters. So that's 50 rupees. Okay, so you're looking at 50 rupees as a percentage of the income. So if someone earns 100 rupees, then this is 50% of his income. But if someone earns 200 rupees, then the same 50 rupees becomes 25% of his income. So this is telling you that it's measured in terms of the resident's average income. That's what it is. So it's telling you how the measurement of the financial impact is being done. We've understood this. So now that we've understood it, let me just black that out so that we can focus on the sentence to a greater extent, the essence of the sentence. So here we go. I black this out. Measured in terms of, I'm just blacking this thing out as well. Now let's read the sentence. It says, after country Z increased its per litre gasoline tax, the financial impact of the increase was less for the residents of the northeastern province than for residents of other provinces. Very simple. What it says is that after country Z increased the tax per litre, it was found that the financial impact vis-a-vis the income was less for the people living in the NEP, the northeastern province, as compared to the residents of other provinces. Now I want you to think, what are the reasons that the impact could be less? Now, one reason, like we just saw, is that the percentage is lesser, the financial impact is lesser if the income is more. We just saw that. So when you have 200 rupees and there's a 50 uh, there's an increase of 50 rupees, that's 25%. But if you have only 50 rupees with you and there's an increase of 50 rupees, that's a 100% increase, right? So the first reason why it could be less is because, you know, the people in the NEP have more money, have higher salaries. Okay. The second reason is, hey, you may not be using. So let's say two people have the same salary. Okay, let's say two people have similar income. Okay, let's say both of them have 100 rupees. 100 rupees. There are two people, A and B. Okay, or in this case, two provinces, the NEP and another. But here, let's say the first person uses only 1 liter of the gasoline, so that's 10 rupees. Someone else uses 5 liters. So here you can see the financial impact is 50%, here it's 10%, which means that if a person uses less gasoline, then that also results in a lesser financial impact. Now here's the next point that we will look at. Okay, when you see the argument, the final sentence, you can see that it starts with most likely then. You see this? Most likely then. You can see here that an opinion is being given to you. Okay, when you see something like an opinion, you can almost be sure that what follows is the conclusion. Okay, you will find words like so, thus, therefore, apparently, clearly. These are words that generally precede the conclusion. The conclusion here says that most likely then, the residents of the northeastern province drive fewer kilometers than residents of other provinces. So the conclusion is that people of this region drive lesser, which means this is kind of pointing towards the fact that they use less gasoline. So what you can see from the conclusion is that we kind of thought of these two possibilities here, right? Because of which the impact could be less. When you see the conclusion, it becomes obvious that they're saying that, hey, they drive less, which means that they use less gasoline. So it's not really so much focusing on the higher salaries. So now we've been able to understand as to what the argument is, right? So the argument is kind of saying that there's a lesser financial impact because they drive lesser, which basically means they use less gasoline. With this understanding, let us go ahead and see the options. Okay, so we know that the less financial impact is because of lesser usage and not because of higher salaries. Okay, now that we know this, we have to look at the options and see as to which one of these options does not strengthen what we have just identified here as the argument. Okay, let's look at the options one by one. Let's look at option A. It says the average income, okay, is roughly the same, which means that we had said we want to reject this thing about more income, right? That's what our argument was, that our argument says that there is no more income. And if you see, this is saying it's the same, which means it's supporting it. Well, we found a supporting, and we're looking for the one that does not support. Let's look at option B. It says that the automobiles driven by the residents are no more fuel efficient than those of other provinces. Okay, so if they are not more fuel efficient, okay, it means that definitely you are driving it lesser, right? Let's say your vehicles, both of the vehicles consume, say, give you a mileage of 10 kilometers per liter, and you end up spending less, right? So you can see that you're spending less money. Okay, it's because you're driving lesser, right? And that's what we saw as our conclusion, that they drive less, right? So they drive less. This was our conclusion, and this is supporting this conclusion. So B is also supporting. Look at option C. It says public transportation is more convenient and less expensive in the northeastern province. This also shows as to why people use public transport. If they use public transport, it means they drive less. Again, it supports. Look at option D. It says workers in the northeastern province live closer to their workplaces. If they live closer to their workplaces, again it supports that they drive less. Look at option E. It says the climate of the northeastern province permits most drivers to use a grade of gasoline that is less expensive. Oh, here you see something different. Here it says that the financial impact is less, but not because of lesser usage, but because it is cheaper, right? So maybe these guys have petrol that's only 5 rupees per liter, okay? And so they can be driving more and yet saving money, which means that this does not support this argument, and therefore E is the answer. I hope you were able to follow and understand what we just did here. Another question where you're required to find the option that most strengthens the ecologist's reasoning here. Okay, pause the video, try solving it yourself, and then we'll go for it together. Okay, let's read the argument together. It says, many kinds of fungi live in old trees, but few live in young trees. Okay. Insects eat leaves and bark of young trees far more often than they eat the leaves and bark of old trees. Okay. When a team of ecologists discovered that some fungi produce compounds that are lethal to insects, they concluded, you found your conclusion here, that the fungi were probably responsible for the old tree's resistance to the insects. Okay, when you see something like probably, this is again another word that reflects opinion and therefore points towards this thing being the conclusion. Let us see this in some detail now. Let's say you have the old trees and you have the young trees. Okay. Now what you see here is that the fungi live in old trees but not so much in young trees. So you have many kinds of fungi in the old trees and not so many in the young trees. Okay. It says that insects eat the barks of young trees. So here I put a tick mark here that insects eat the barks of young trees and not so much with the old trees. Okay. And then it was found that some fungi produce some compounds that are lethal to insects. So it's like you know that there are some compounds that the fungi produce something that kind of kills the insects. Okay. They concluded that the fungi were probably responsible for the old trees' resistance to insects, because you see you have something, the fungi here, and the fungi are lethal to the insects, and therefore they concluded that they're resistant to the insects. Okay, let's look at the argument once again. It says that old trees have many kinds of fungi. Okay, out of these many kinds of fungi, some of these fungi produce compounds that are lethal to insects, and therefore the researchers conclude, so the ecologists conclude, that this is why the old trees are resistant. Okay, now in this argument, do you see a problem? Right, let me ask you a question. The question is, could the trees be resistant because of some other reason? Maybe let's say if an old tree, becomes really hard or maybe really bitter, or it becomes poisonous with time simply because it is old, and therefore insects don't go there, they don't eat it. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe the reason is not fungi. So there could be two sides to this, right? If the answer to this is that yes, they could be resistance because of some other reason, that they have their resistance that has come about because of some other reason, then it weakens the argument, right? Because the argument is saying that it is because of the fungi. But if you say that, hey, it is because of the fungi alone and there can be no other reason, right, for the resistance of the trees, then it strengthens the argument, you know. Let's see, now that we've thought about it, we have some of the points that are given within the passage, within the argument. We've also been able to think about this. Let us see which of the options strengthens it the most. So when I look at the options, I'm looking for the option that strengthens by saying that, hey, the compounds produced by the fungi alone are the reason for the resistance of the old trees. And now when I look at the options, of course I don't have this as such, I don't have it in the same form. Right, pause the video, try the question yourself, and identify the option that strengthens the argument of the ethicist the most. Here's a tip that you could use when solving the problems in the logical reasoning section or even the reading comprehension section. In most questions of logical reasoning, you have a passage. Of course, it's not quite as long as that in the RC section, but still, at times it can be long. And while you read this, you might tend to get lost or you might meander. In such a scenario, a good way to first approach a passage, especially when you're starting off, is to invest on this entire passage maybe just 10 seconds, right? Not more than 10 seconds. And basically what this process is what is called skimming. Okay. So you're basically just going to glance through the whole thing very quickly. Okay. And what you'll try to see is, what is this passage about? So you're not really getting into the details of it. You just want to be acquainted. When you look at this in even 3 seconds, you'd find that you have seen a couple of things. So let's do this very quickly together. Let's maybe invest 10 seconds on this together and see what we can identify. First line, the prohibition against lying is done because misleading. Okay. To diminish the confidence. You should not lie to people. Okay. Because you lower the confidence. Quick. It says when you lie about a secret ballot, no harm comes. Oh, when you're voting and you lie about whom you voted for, okay, let's move ahead. It says, therefore, when anyone is asked by a pollster how she voted, it is permissible to lie. You see, now you have an idea of what happened, what is in here. I was talking, so it kind of slowed it down, but if you were doing this silently, it would have been a lot faster. So what you've basically seen here is that, hey, we should not lie because when you lie, it causes some kinds of problems. However, when you lie about the secret ballot, it was something that was meant to be secret, and therefore when you lie about a secret, it's not bad. Therefore, if someone asks you whom you voted for, it's okay to lie. Kind of like, let's say if a friend of mine tells me to keep a secret, and then somebody asks me something about that secret, and I lie, it's not bad. Now let's look at this in some detail. I hope you got the point. This is not specifically for this question, and like I said, I don't want you to only be addressing single questions when you're solving the problems here. You are trying to cultivate a method and improve yourself so that you can solve more questions. So we have 3 sentences here on a little passage that talks about the ethics of lying. Okay, the first sentence says that you should not lie because it causes harm. As you can see here, it says the prohibition against lying is based on the harm done by the misleading of others and the tendency of false statements to diminish the confidence that we want in each other's assertion. So it's talking about a harm, and then it talks about what the harm is. Okay, second sentence. It says that when you lie about the secret ballot, it causes no harm. It says when you do this, no harm comes to the questioner by being deceived, because the falsehood tends to produce a general distrust of assertions concerning how anyone has voted. It furthers the end for which the voting has been made secret. So when you lie, the secret remains a secret, and so no harm has accrued from that. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the third line. The third line, and you can see the word therefore, and you know therefore that this is leading to the conclusion. Like I said, some words indicate that you have a conclusion, and it says therefore it is permissible to lie in this particular case. So once again, let's summarize this for ourselves, because we now have to go and see as to which of the options is strengthening this. It says lying is prohibited because it causes harm, no harm when secret ballot, so lying is permissible in this case. The rule that I can kind of infer from here, the principle that we can see here, is that lying is permissible if it causes no harm. Okay, let's see as to which of the options kind of augurs well with this and supports it the most. So until now, we've been able to understand that this is a premise of the argument that lying is prohibited because it causes harm. We also saw that as far as the secret ballot is concerned, lying causes no harm. This in a way also acts as a premise. And then we had the conclusion here. Okay. Now you can strengthen an argument by providing an assumption, right? So you'll find that in almost any argument there's always a missing premise somewhere or the other, right? You can supply that assumption into it, or maybe you can strengthen it by strengthening the conclusion, or you can provide evidence for the premise. All of these things help to strengthen an argument. Okay, now what I'll do is I will display the answer to you in a bit without really getting too much more into an explanation. Why I do that is for you to see whether you were able to find the right answer or not. In fact, you can pause the video at this point, and let me tell you that even after this elaborate discussion, after which you've understood the passage, you've understood the question, it is still possible that you may not get the right answer. And this points not to the fact that you've not been able to understand, but to the fact that there's a specific training that requires to be done to get the answer right, to be able to align your thinking and your comprehension to what is expected of you in the exam. In case you find that you've not gotten the right answer, don't feel disheartened. It just means that you need to realign yourself. You need to understand what the language of the examination is. Okay, so pause the video, try solving it by yourself, and then I'm giving you the answer in a moment. Okay, so here's the answer. The answer is D. Think about it. Think about why it is the right answer. Think about why the others are not the right answers. This exercise will help you. Simply watching these videos with popcorn in your hand is not going to help you go ahead and do better in the exam. I wish you all the best. Let us go